with you on Enlightened World Network. And it's Friday. Today's topic, what is today's topic? Today's topic is intergenerational trauma and healing our history and recognizing the power of our past, personal and interpersonal, to shape our future and how we can free ourselves of that to whatever degree possible. So before we get started, let's just take a deep breath in, hold it, and imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs and flooding your bloodstream and nourishing your cells and your organs and bringing vitality and life. And as you exhale, roll your shoulders, release any tension, and let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it, and this time imagine sparkling white light coursing through the molecules and the electrons in your body and lighting you up and connecting you with the universe beyond. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension. And now let's just gently press our palms together and softly, softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel that sensation. Presence yourself to that sensation to bring yourselves focused right here, right now. And good morning and welcome. So, one of the things that I have noticed in my work with myself and with my clients is that we often have issues that we address straight on or we work with ongoingly, and we don't necessarily acknowledge or recognize the trauma associated with those things that we're addressing. So actually today's topic is lineage, and what I mean by lineage is the rich history, the rich cache of experience that has been passed on to us, not only from our genetics or our immediate family, but as part of the human family, that there's a field of information that we are in some senses, well, we're beneficiaries of and also subject to. And what we have the ability to do when we recognize it, I believe, is to relieve ourselves of some of the patterned trauma from centuries and centuries and millennia of human existence on the planet. And this idea of addressing the trauma around an issue, rather in addition to or over and above addressing an issue itself, was a revelation to me when I was doing abundance work. And so we're probably all familiar with looking at how we can manifest more abundance and comfort and ease in our lives. And what I realized for myself in doing that work was that I had a lot of trauma around money. So here I was working to create abundance, but I wasn't overtly addressing the traumatic experiences that I had had around it. And we might also see the same kind of dynamic with weight, for instance. So many of us have issues around weight and wanting to change our physiology, and we want to weigh more, we want to weigh less, but in the process of working on the weight, we don't necessarily directly address the trauma related to the issues of weight itself. So oftentimes, issues around weight are a result of trauma. Hello, Jana Mackey Port. Welcome, welcome. It's great to have you here. We're talking about lineage and inheritance and the kinds of things that we inherit as human beings, just by virtue of being human beings, things that are often invisible, and how maybe addressing those traumas directly can. Good morning, Dido. So glad to have you here. How addressing those traumas directly can have a profound impact on our ability to create different outcomes than we would if we didn't address the trauma part. So I was just talking about weight and how many of us have suffered with issues around weight, and typically the way that we address the issues is by hello, Hope. Welcome. Good afternoon to you. Wonderful to have you here. And Jana says ancestral healing. Love this. Yes. Well, this is kind of a new take on things, right? Because first we want to be looking at our own trauma. It's kind of this concentric circle expansion thing. But if we look at our own trauma around an issue, so here I'm talking about weight, what we look at is how can we modify our behavior? How can we shift our physiology? How can we release the underlying trauma that is manifesting as weight? But what we typically don't do is look at the traumas related to the weight issue itself, like being taunted or the other kinds of side effects that may have happened around issues of weight, or for instance, issues of money, like maybe there were specific traumas related to having money or not having money that get cleared because those traumas are holding patterns in place. Okay, so that's one circle. Now, the thing is that there are other influences outside that first circle, which is the circle of self. Then there is the circle of family. So with the circle of family, maybe your family has all kinds of trauma and history around money, for example, where you by default have inherited lots and lots of beliefs and ideas about money, about abundance, about worthiness, about struggle from your family. And maybe you as a family experienced specific traumas around even weight too. Maybe all your whole family has the same issues around weight, being too heavy, too thin, too whatever. And so there are inheritances of ideas and patterns and beliefs that we're often not even aware of because we're so deeply steeped in those beliefs and perspectives, because we were born into it. So it's like a fish in water. A fish doesn't, well, we don't really know what a fish knows or doesn't know, but we can imagine that a fish doesn't realize it's in water because it's always been in water. So water is the world in a way. And that's so much the case with ourselves within our families. And then beyond the family is our culture, our cultural traditions, perhaps our community traditions, maybe religious traditions and beliefs and traumas, historical traumas from the groups that we identify with. Different religious organizations and groups and affiliations have attendant to them specific traumas that are historic and woven into the very fabric of the experience and identity of that group. And then if we go beyond that, we get to look at our identity within our state or our country, or and then globally as a member of humanity, and the traditions and the history and the traumas that humanity has evolved through over centuries and centuries. And so when we look at freeing ourselves from patterns, when we look, the sort of one of the themes of this week has been creating a future that we want to or desire to live into. And part of that, a massive and important and primary part of that, is freeing ourselves from the constraints and the patterns of a past that are holding us in a or keeping us in a negative trajectory or a destructive trajectory, and even more so keeping us from sensing the possibility and generating the possibility of a future that is not necessarily continuous from the past. You know, we've heard the past predicts the future, but it doesn't need to. It doesn't have to. We can have a quantum shift in order to have. Good morning, Isabel. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you here. We're talking about lineage and lineage as humans, and also within our families, and also throughout our own lives, the trauma and ideas and beliefs that are passed down to us that we often don't even begin to question, because it's almost as if they are part of our DNA, and perhaps they're part of our energetic DNA at the very least, because they're part of our field. And by addressing these traumas beyond just the manifestation of that issue, we'll call issue in our lives. I was using two examples, money and weight, for instance. Beyond building ourselves around abundance, what we get to do, for instance, with this idea of trauma around money, is perhaps create a visualization and meditation that allows us to presence ourselves and our energy here and notice all these tendrils that reach into our personal past, the tendrils that reach into the culture within our own immediate family, and then our broader family, and then our perhaps racial or ethnic or religious traumas that are all tied into that. And then we can move into the broader perspective of humanity and around abundance. You know, there's history, whether it's our personal history or not, there's a tremendous history of starvation and privation and poverty and suffering, and all of these tendrils are connected to us by virtue of being part of this larger family. And as we can put our attention on this big web that we are immersed in, that into which we are interwoven, we can imagine cutting those ties. We can imagine all those tendrils releasing and sort of disintegrating and falling away. And notice that as we allow those tendrils to release, there's freedom of movement, there's freedom of breathing, there's freedom of being that wasn't formerly available. If we can just allow that trauma to fall away, to enrich us in terms of its purest wisdom, and to release us from its bonds and its boundaries, to be able to be present and generative in a way that was previously impossible because of all these bonds that we had going back throughout millennia. And so I'm wondering, as you just even imagine that in this moment, if you can just presence yourself to your body and your being and recognize all these ties that have held you to certain beliefs and certain patterns, and those seen and unseen, because so much of our beliefs and our perspectives are a function of forces that are invisible to us because we're so deeply immersed in them. But if we can imagine just all this tapestry that has held us bound. This tapestry, by the way, has also provided us with an identity or a multitude of identities. And in this presencing to the possibility of the future, what is called for is a release of the hold onto and from these identities. And I know I've spoken about this with you before, but if we can shift our relationship with identity to that of a device and a tool for our experience, a window for our experience, or a vehicle, a chosen vehicle for our experience, rather than rather than something that is solid, that is fact, this is who I am, without, if we can utilize it instead of having it own us, then we have the freedom to be more fully expressed as the true light that we are, the expression of life itself, without all those confinements and constraints. And as we let go and dissolve these traumas and beliefs and ideas from generations and generations of humanity, then we allow ourselves the greater capacity to evolve into this transcendent human that this moment calls for, to move into the next evolution and next evolutionary expression of humanity on the planet, and the possibility that we can embody for a new future. So what do you think of this? How does it feel if you start imagining just loosening the grip of all of these tendrils from our past and our heritage? So many of our family stories are rooted in struggle and suffering and triumph and challenge. And I'm wondering how you experience allowing yourself to address that tie, that trauma, and clear it. As far as technologies or techniques for clearing trauma, we've spoken about this a lot before, but tapping is a really, really powerful tool to be able to connect with, release, and transform trauma, traumatic experiences, and beyond. So I'm wondering if even just a visualization, and maybe doing that visualization while going through a tapping process, you can find information around tapping at the Tapping Solution. I think it's .com, it might be .org, but if you look up the Tapping Solution, you'll be able to find it. And it's a really powerful personal technique. I'm just wondering if you combine that with a visualization of all of these tendrils from everywhere and allowing yourself to be released from those tendrils of trauma, keep the wisdom, but we can keep the wisdom and we can have access to the wisdom and we can even have access to the knowledge of the trauma, etc., without the attachment of it, without its confining and binding us to our reactivity to it, or to its influence on our. Thank you, Dido, as always. It's the tappingsolution.com. Thank you. You're my hero. Anyway, there the thing that is the nuance here, I think, is to allow the attachment to the trauma and the history, to allow that to dissolve, and then to be able to be present to it as well. So we're not losing anything. What we're gaining is the ability to, is the freedom to see more clearly. We're gaining the freedom to have conscious choice. We're gaining the freedom to generate something new out of a nothingness, if you will, because we're not at the effect of it all the time. So by freeing ourselves of our attachments, in other words, by breaking the cords to all of this trauma and cultural conditioning, what we allow ourselves to do is to create something truly new and truly responsive to the needs and the call of the moment. So Jana says, I'll check this out. Have to go to work. Thanks so much. So glad to have you here, Jana, and congratulations to you to be able to have work to go to. That's wonderful, and I'm happy for you. And your fortune, your good fortune. So thanks for joining us. And so what do you say, guys? What do you think about this? Roz says a mantra. Yes, a mantra, indeed. Welcome, Roz, and so glad to have you here. A mantra to be able to clear ourselves and be present, like to recognize, I let go of the ancestors, I let go of or I expand to include beyond the trauma. I expand to include the trauma without being bound by it. I recognize it. I am able to free myself from the impact of it. And we have unbounded capacity. We have unbounded capability for light and creativity and creation. And our boundedness comes from the ideas, identities, traumas, experiences that we impose on ourselves, or that we receive because we're unaware. So there's, as we expand our awareness, as we wake up to the impact, for instance, that this unseen trauma, maybe unrecognized trauma, has had on us, then we have the ability to address it directly, right? And to clear it. And it's remarkable what is possible as a result of that process. So one of the greatest areas is, that will have such a profound impact, because it is money, because money and abundance is tied with survival. So when we start releasing the trauma around survival and the cultural and familial and uh, humanity scale trauma around survival, which is linked to money, plus maybe our own traumas in our own lifetime related to money, then there's much more room for the abundance work that we do to have an impact, to have a richer and deeper impact. And it was a revelation to wake up to the fact that there was more at work than my own personal issues in the challenges of my life. And not in the way of blame or anything, but to recognize all these other things that had influences that I hadn't considered, and to broaden that whole awareness allows us to create a more impactful outcome, because we're recognizing the water that we as the fish have been swimming in, and we can say, oh, that water could use some purification here. And as we get to do that, then our experience of being in the water transforms, because the quality of the water itself has also transformed. So hopefully some of this makes sense, and is something that you can use and look at in your life to say, oh, wow, I noticed that this particular pattern is, my mom has the same pattern, or my dad has the same pattern, or I see this dynamic in my entire family, or look at this within my community, and I see this certain predisposition in my community. Maybe that's something that I can heal. The beauty of taking that on for yourself is that in the process, not only are you healing yourself, but as we elevate and heal ourselves, we heal others around us. So the healing that we do for ourselves is intergenerational and probably multicultural, and connects with the whole human family, and the planet, and all the other sentient life forms, sentient beings, and all the other forms of energy here. So I think that that's a great way to wrap up the week. And I am eager to hear about your adventures with this. I think it's pretty exciting to see that we can influence the past as well as the future by healing ourselves in this moment. And that includes recognizing that we are part of a continuum, and that these threads that connect us forward and back. And so by healing them, refining them, releasing them, we create a ripple in the universe that continuously flows outward. So on that note, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I'm here on Enlightened World Network's Facebook page every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And as always, I encourage you to check out the wonderful programming and community on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. There's always great programming, and there's especially wonderful programming on the weekends. So until Dido says, We can heal the past and the future by healing the present. Beautiful. Thank you, Dido. I do believe that that's the truth, because all moments in all time exist here in this moment. And by healing this moment, we heal the world. So on that note, so much love to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me. And I so deeply, deeply appreciate our time together.